Hello, today is going to be a little bit different session because I am having to use my mobile device and then look at the computer on the screen instead of my computer. So bear with me today. We're talking about strategies for retaining talent amidst record staff turnover rates. Many organizations are continuing to experience record turnover rates after the pandemic. In this open office hours session for executives, we're going to delve into a critical issue that many organizations are facing today. And that's really is record high staff turnover, whether that's in your professional roles or whether that's actually in your staff level positions. But while your strong employment brand may attract talent, the challenge really lies in retaining your top talent and your workforce overall, right? So, especially when you're dealing with very distinct groups like your hourly paid colleagues, and as I said before, as well as your high demand office based professionals. And this reality can actually lead to workforce immaturity as well as a lack of experience, which hinders the acceleration and execution of your strategic initiatives. So, we want to talk about that. I asked you for some questions, and so we're just going to tackle some of the questions that have actually come in, and also some questions that I really think you should be asking. Question number one. So, what are the latest statistics and trends in staff turnover across industries, and how do they compare to your organization? Well, of course, I don't have the data for your organization or your particular industry, right? But here's what I will say is that recent studies show that turnover rates have surged to unprecedented levels, and that really is across the board, right? Across multiple industries, with some sectors experiencing turnover rates as high as 30%. So, what is your industry? We know that certain industries, of course, such as retail, they're going to have a higher staff turnover rate. The further you move from your corporate office, you know that you're going to have a higher turnover rate there. But it really is crucial to benchmark your organization's turnover rates against your industry standards, as I said before. That helps you to actually gauge the severity of the issue, right? So it may be that you're thinking that that's a reality, but when you're looking at what's happening across the board, it's really not a concern for you. I'm not going to say it's not a concern. Let me take that back. Let me back that back up. It's a concern, but it may not be as bad as you think, right? Across your industry. The next question, can I provide insights into the key reasons why employees could be leaving your organization? That's really specific to your organization. Again, it could be industry. It could be the benefits that you're actually offering and where you're located. I'm going to give you an example. I remember years ago, I was employed and working at this really fantastic company. Love the organization, love the leaders, but we got a change in CEO. The new CEO entered that particular industry, that particular organization, and wanted to change up a number of things that was going to have an impact on retention. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we didn't have at that particular organization was we had the ability to, and so we didn't have, but I'm going to say this in light of something else. We had the ability at that particular organization to be off on Fridays, half day Fridays. And that really worked for the vast majority of the people at the corporate location, right? Everybody was excited about being off on Fridays. And I remember getting an offer from another company, and they said, well, you can be off on every other Friday. Do I want to be off on a half day every Friday, or do I want to be off every other Friday? That was the key difference. Next thing is that I was in a building. With this particular building, this organization was completely off every single Friday. They wore shorts during the summertime. They had staff lunch every single day from a chef that was paid for. So when you're looking at where people are going, I don't know what's happening. But in that particular organization at that company, we're in a building with strong other companies, right? So people will leave our company to go to this other company that was in the same building. So it had a significant impact. When you're looking at the pandemic, some people are saying, you know what, you can work from home. Other companies are saying, we don't want our employees to work from home. We really believe the collaboration takes place inside our offices, so our employees cannot work from home. That can have an impact on your retention, all right? Could be leadership. How strong are your leaders? You have some organizations who pride themselves on having really strong leadership, high performing talent, strong employment brand, strong culture. So I want to ask you, what are your exit interviews saying? What are your surveys saying? What are your pulse surveys or your voice of the employee surveys saying? Or maybe perhaps it's just a focus group, but are you speaking to your employees to see what is it that they actually desire? You can give them benefits. It's kind of like giving a gift at Christmas time. You give this gift at Christmas time and you're so excited about it, or maybe perhaps you're not. But nevertheless, you give it to somebody. If they don't value that particular gift, then what difference did it really make? You gave them something essentially to say that you gave them something in their mind, possibly. And they could be excited about the gift, but not necessarily value the gift. Sometimes people just want to have a number of benefits that are available to them. Perhaps they like the ability to progress in their career. So maybe you have a lack of career growth opportunities. Are you bringing people in from the outside versus raising them up on the inside? So those are some reasons why people could possibly be leaving your organization. Perhaps you have outdated practices. But I want you to think about this. Identify the commonalities between two workforce segments to tailor your retention strategies effectively. And that's for the person who's asking, what are the commonalities among hourly paid employees and office-based professionals? That's a common question. You have people who say, you know what, we have our salaried professionals and or our corporate professionals, they have they get these benefits, and then you have your hourly employees and they don't necessarily, for example, have that flexibility, right? And so do you have a different employee experience? If so, you want to identify the commonalities between those two segments and tailor your retention strategies effectively. Perhaps for your we'll just say your hourly employees, perhaps you can't give them flexibility because of the type of work that they do. But what else could you actually offer them? Maybe they have the opportunity to upskill. Maybe they have the opportunity to work on projects that expose them to other leaders, and they can see a career path within your particular organization. So those are just some of the things to think about, Taylor. How can we tailor our retention strategies to meet the unique needs and expectations of hourly paid colleagues versus office professionals? We just kind of talked about that. Again, it could be a number of things. I want to challenge you, though, of thinking that throwing a whole lot of stuff at employees' wellness programs, and you got rewards and recognition, and you got this, and you got this, and you got this. You have all of the things, and they're not necessarily making your employees happy and keeping them there. So I want you to think again about what could you actually offer them. So I won't repeat that particular question, but that again, that's just something to think about. Next question, what role does leadership play in talent retention? Kind of talked about this. And how can we develop human-centric leadership practices to address the issue effectively? We all know that leadership sets the tone for employee engagement, for employees to give their discretionary effort, for employees to be, I would say, loyal and committed. It sets the tone for the culture of your organization. So I want you to think about that. What kind of leaders do you have at your organization? I'll never forget working for a company. And at the very beginning of my tenure there, I had there was a senior leader at that organization, an executive, who essentially apologized for running the company into the ground. And so that's something to kind of think about. What kind of tone? And so as I continued to work at that company, I began to see how leadership showed up, right? And I could see why he actually made that particular comment. So it could be how you actually manage, the management style. The leadership could have a leadership journey, and they can say, this is our leadership strategy, this is our leadership philosophy. But when it comes to a leader, a manager, they're effectively, right, carrying out that particular tone with who they promote, what they deal with, how they actually execute on initiatives. So they're setting the tone for employee engagement and retention, and determining whether, would you say, two people on the same team have the same employment experience? Do they lean towards their favorite? Do they, I was talking to someone yesterday who was talking about their particular organization. They ensure that leadership is not just giving bonuses or merit to only, or I would say, not just merit, right, but the greater percentages, the higher percentages to their friends, their friend groups. And so I want you to think about that. Practicing human-centric leadership. Are your leaders empathetic towards your employees? How do you show up? How do you communicate? Communication is so huge. How do you resolve conflicts at your organization? So that can actually lead to talent retention and those human-centric leadership practices that you were speaking about. And of course, it significantly impacts your ability to retain talent. I want to ask you this: do you have values training? One of the things that I would recommend is training on your organization's values and embedding those values throughout your entire employee experience. Do you promote based upon those values? Do you attract and hire based upon those values? Do you let people go when necessary because they're violating the values? So do you protect the culture and advance the culture? Surveys. Are you talking to your people? Are you doing something with the data of what they actually give you? How do you assess your culture? How do you measure, I would say, employee performance? And what is your performance management tool? Because there are different philosophies, and I have a very strong opinion about one in particular, but we won't go into that. But I just want you to look at your performance management, and then also, of course, like I said before, your surveys. And so, are you taking the surveys and doing something with the data? Do you take the surveys, get angry, upset, say that data is invalid, and you do nothing with the data? That's something to really think about. What specific actions and initiatives can you implement immediately to improve talent retention within your organization? Let me think about that. What specific actions and initiatives can we implement immediately to improve talent retention within your organization? It depends upon what you say immediately. I have some thoughts on that. One of the things I would say you could do pretty quickly will be mentorship programs and advocacy programs, and probably some employee resource groups. Those are some things that you can do. Those are some quick wins, right? And maybe an employee council, perhaps having your leaders to identify some pressing issues that they will like some assistance on, and they want to brainstorm or have employees to solve this particular specific issue. That's something that I would actually say. Of course, your focus groups take a little bit longer time. VOE and pulse surveys take a longer time. Segmenting your populations based upon that data takes more time as well. But those are all things that I would actually recommend. Your exit interviews, of course, that's something you can immediately take action on. Skip level meetings, you can take immediate action on. Let's see, what else could you, looking at your data, perhaps doing something with the data. Retention interviews. Why do people actually stay? You have exit interviews, but do you ever even ask people why they stay? That's something that you can also take immediate action on to improve talent retention within your organization. So those are some quick wins I would recommend. Next question: what are the potential consequences of continued turnover rates on your company's strategic objectives and long-term success? What are the potential consequences of continued high turnover rates on your company's strategic objectives and long-term success? Let me make sure I'm saying this correctly. Give me just a second. Okay, potential consequences on high turnover rates. So, of course, achieving your company's strategic objectives, it relies on the quality of your, number one, you got to have talent. So you got to have talent, but also the type of talent that you have. So what type of talent population do you have? Do you have high performers? Do you have A players? How are you actually developing those? So the potential consequences could be huge. If you're losing your average talent, and people don't really subscribe to this, but when you are losing your middle performers, they're keeping the company going, right? So you have a certain percentage which are high performers, you got a certain percentage of low performers. But when you have high turnover rate, who are you losing? Because losing a low performer and losing a high performer are not equal. And so if you're losing your high performers and you're losing your average performers, that's not necessarily good. But if you're losing these individuals and you are bringing in individuals who are much better, that could be a win. But it definitely has an impact on your sustainability. It has an impact on your trust level for your employees as well as for your customers if they see that something is constantly happening at this particular organization. You have a learning curve when you enter into an organization before you're productive and effective at your job, especially in certain roles. So You are losing that knowledge when people leave out the organization who know how and why we do something. And there's a learning curve, right? Of getting people up to speed on the work that you're actually doing. So that can have an impact on your organization. You have decreased effort. People are just not putting out as much work or giving as much effort as they traditionally would. So that has a consequence on your organization's strategic objectives and long-term success. So that means you have to push your projects out a little bit further. It may mean that you have to reset, recalibrate, and determine, do we have the talent that's needed to move forward with this particular initiative? That's something to actually think about. It has an impact to your budget. If you have to push out something or wait on it, or if you have to think about replacing that talent and maybe you're replacing at a higher cost, that has an impact on the budget of your organization, right, and your profitability. And so I want you to think about that. But of course, know that already. Your client experience, if you have employees who are not as invested, is your customer and client experience the same? We've already talked about reputational risk. We've talked about discretionary effort. Of course, I've said that. Increasing your recruitment costs. We've talked about that. And then just the team morale, how your employees are actually feeling when they're not feeling their best, when they're overworked, because sometimes you don't adjust the work, right? When they're overworked, then that can lead to other issues impacting your budget, impacting your ability to deliver on what you promise, but it also impacts the morale and it can lead to burnout. And so I want you to consider that as well. So the consequences of high turnover rates, it's more than just money. It's more than just people are leaving and coming. And you have people who say it's not a big deal. Actually, it is a big deal if you were begin to measure that and see what is the cost of that. What is it actually costing you? What's the impact of that? And that's where you can find that your strategic HR business partner can be of great value to your organization when you're looking at that. And of course, I believe I said reputational risk. Are there any myths or misconceptions about staff turnover that executives should be aware of? And what are the essential truths about talent retention in today's workplace? Well, one common myth is that higher salaries will lead to retention. Not necessarily so. We think that if we give people more money, it's all about the money. Or if we think that if it's a millennial, it's a youth, I'm saying youth, a young person, that it's all about corporate social responsibility and flexibility. Not necessarily true. The truth about retention in today's workplace is that it really varies by the individual. What's important to me may not necessarily be important to you. And so some people will say, show it to me, show me the money. It's all about the dollar. But then you have other people say, it's not necessarily about the dollar, but how I'm treated and valued and the impact that I can actually have on the organization and its goals. Other individuals will say it's the flexibility. I have small children perhaps, and I need to be available for my family. Other people will say it's the opportunity. What am I learning here? This will look great on my resume. And so the essential truth about today's workplace is that you've got to talk to people. You can't just assume that the dollars are going to lead to retention. You can't assume that this particular population will feel the same way. Maybe it's different. And so I want you to think about your employees as humans, not robots. And they actually can think, they have feelings, they have emotions, they have insight, they have reasons. Where I am at this particular stage in my career, maybe something different. And I'm looking for something different than someone else, right? And so that has an impact on retention. But I do want you to get away from the idea that higher salaries are going to lead to retention. Not necessarily. You can give them all the money in the world, but if they don't believe in the vision, the mission, your leadership, are they going to stay? Will the high performers or the people who you want to stay actually stay? Can I share some success stories or best practices from other organizations that have effectively managed and reduced turnover? Yeah, it's just deciding that you're going to be a best place to work, a great place to work. That's one thing that you can actually do. And it's making the decision and then following through with that. And so when I say that is what's your experience at this company? Do you decide that next year we're going to be on that list? Do you decide we're going to be the best in the industry? So make a decision that, we're going to show up and we're going to be the very best. We're going to be a destination organization where people come and they want to stay. And that's one thing that you can actually do to effectively manage and reduce staff turnover. You can determine that, our competitive advantage is going to be XYZ. Perhaps for your organization, it's leadership. Perhaps for somebody else's organization, it could be culture. Someone else can say their competitive advantage would be getting to work on key initiatives, whatever the case is. But I want you to think about, what's your competitive advantage? Why do employees want to work at your organization and stay? And whatever it is, whatever your employees say, continue to do just that, while also evolving, right, with the community, evolving with what's happening in your particular country, your region, your industry. That's something to think about. One of the things I strongly suggest is having a listening culture. What are your employees saying? Are you doing something with the information? Are you shooting down what they say, or do you listen and you really hear and you really follow through and you don't take the easy way out every time there's an opportunity, right? There's something you're gonna have to put your money where your mouth is. We've talked about culture. I'm going to say this as well: continuously investing in their learning, growth, their development. It's not just about, we have a career path. Are you helping them with that career path? Are you really talking to your employees and building relationships about their dreams and their goals and their hopes, and helping them to get there no matter what role they are within your organization? That can help you reduce turnover. Do you prioritize their well-being? Not just have a wellness and a well-being program, but you prioritize that. Do you foster a culture of rewards and recognition and inclusion? Equity. That's a big one. Do employees have the opportunity to solve problems that actually matter to your leaders? They matter to your customers. And then the two actually that I absolutely love and I recommend for everybody, every single company, is when you have the opportunity to give employees autonomy and empowerment, take advantage of that every single time. Empower them and then give them autonomy in the work that they do. Next question: how can we measure the ROI of our retention efforts, and what key performance indicators should you track to assess their effectiveness? Well, you can track measures such as such as turnover rates, cost per hire, employee satisfaction scores over time, the employee satisfaction scores for a particular team or a leader. That's going to be important. They will help you to assess the effectiveness of your initiatives. But I also want to say this: I want you to determine the key metrics before you begin work on those initiatives, before you begin implementation, right? So when you are putting your project plan together and you're doing your research, what metrics do you want to track, and why do you want to track those metrics? Why is it important? And then look for and what else? And what else should we be looking at? So example, determine if there's a certain population you desire to retain. So maybe it's your high performers, your top talent. And maybe you say, if our employees, we want to have top talent at, we'll just say 95% of our top talent we want to retain. But for our overall talent, we want to retain maybe 80%. And we'll think those are great numbers. And metrics that you want to measure, I would say, or assess before you begin the work. Millennials, certain locales, leaders. So what is your benchmark is essentially what I'm asking you, and why is it actually important for your organization, and what will that information allow you to do? Last question: in light of our strong employment brand, how can we leverage this asset to not only attract but also retain top talent in a competitive market? I'm going to repeat it again. It's a bit much for me. In light of our strong employment brand, how can we leverage this asset to not only attract, but also retain top talent in a competitive market? I want to ask you about your communication channels at your organization. If you have a strong employment brand, Are you leveraging it across social media? A lot of companies, what I see is they put a lot of effort into what they put out on social media because they want to attract, right? Or attract talent, and then also display to the customers, potential customers, what you're actually doing at your organization. But I want to ask you, what are you doing internal to your organization? Do your employees internally, are they aware of the employment brand? Are you using your brand value proposition to involve your current employees in your recruiting efforts and your re-recruiting efforts? And if you don't know what I mean by re-recruiting efforts, go and watch. I have a video on succession planning, and so I want you to, and retention, and I want you to go and watch that video. So we talk about what does re-recruiting your high performers actually look like. So involve your employees in your recruiting efforts. Have communication channels and a number of communication vehicles within your organization, within, not just external, but also within your organization. And then showcase your commitment to employee growth and well-being, and in your recruitment materials. Have your employees to actually attend, I would say, your internship programs, so to speak, or recruiting fairs. Highlight your unique culture within as well as external to the organization, and success stories to make you more attractive to potential hires and retain your current employees. Have employees to share their stories, right? You don't often hear about your stories, why we like working here. What does this mean to you? How do you view the type of work that you actually do? And so the more that you can actually focus on the people that you already have, it's kind of like when you think about, it's easier to keep an existing customer than to go out and get a new customer. But for whatever reason, we spend a lot of effort going out to get new customers, and the current customers, you don't offer them the same benefits, right? You take them for granted. And I want you to think about that philosophy or that thought. You know, how are you treating your internal employees? Are you giving them more work? Are you valuing them? Do they have flexibility? Do they have a voice? Can they use their voice? And so all of those things help you to retain your top talent in a competitive market. But when you were talking about how do you leverage that asset, your strong employment brand asset, to attract but also retain top talent in a competitive market, you've got to do something internal to your organization. You cannot leave those individuals out. Now, here's the thing. I have a tool that I will love to offer you and provide for you, and it really is what the best companies do to retain talent. If you want that particular resource, what the best companies do to retain talent, just send me a message and just say retention. All you have to do is just email me, for those who got the email, or for those who do not have the email, if you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, just send me a message and just say retention, and I will get that resource out to you immediately. It has some amazing information, a wealth of information of what the absolute best companies out here are doing to attract and retain talent. But we really focus heavily on the retention piece, because you want to know what some people in your particular industry are doing and how you can actually leverage that and get up and going quickly. And I'm going to give you that guide. It's juicy, it's meaty, it's valuable, it's packed full of information. You can take that information, implement just a couple of the things that's in that particular guide, and see that your retention efforts will actually increase if you will measure where you are today, implement the initiatives, and then also take in consideration what else you have going on. But I'm Dr. Sherilyn Payne, here to help you maximize your potential performance as well as your profitability of your individuals as well as your organization itself. I will see you guys back here with the next Q&A. And if you want to send me your questions, I would love for you to just send me a message on LinkedIn with your questions. We will bundle them up. You don't have to be present to have your questions answered, but we'll bundle them up and create a theme, and then answer the questions that you've asked as well as the questions you should be asking. See you guys back here next Thursday.